most people in the world, authors and so on, check their own email.
Yeah.
And it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And so if you ask the question in a sincere, polite way that connects, people get back to you. I love nothing more than watching people grow.
What role have mentors played in your life? Because you certainly have mentored a lot of people, and you were talking about this, the founder of Subway and stuff. How's that work in your life today?
Yeah, I mean, mentors to me, it's like I created, because I didn't get a real MBA, I created what I call my own MBA, a mentor board of advisors. And they're people that I can turn to with a question. I mean, you would be one of them, right? Dan Sullivan says, if the question is how, figure out first who, and then call Joe, right? He calls you up and goes, how can you introduce me? I mean, there are people that are so gifted at certain things. I've got a database of people that are gifted at things that I know when to reach out to and say, hey, I could use some help here. What do you think of this? I mean, it's less about one mentor or even 5 mentors. To me, it's an author that I met once that I know one day I will call upon.
Yeah, yeah. And when you reach out to someone to connect with them, what is your approach?
I just introduce myself quickly and say, here's why I'm calling you. Could I please ask you a question? Can I ask you a favor? Can I ask for some help? And, if I'm ever emailing someone, that's generally the subject line is, I could use a little help, or I've got a question for you. And people, it's amazing. I mean, I think that people often don't realize that most CEOs and most people in the world, authors and so on, check their own email.
Yeah.
And it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And so if you ask the question in a sincere, polite way that connects, people get back to you.
Yeah. Well, see, here's key, and this is the thing that I really want the listeners and viewers to get, is if you genuinely and sincerely say it. Now, you use those words. Now, a lot of people, even that aren't that way, probably think they're sincere and genuine when they're doing it. What surprises me is how many people ask for things that have done zero research on the person that they're asking for.
Absolutely.
Like, they'll reach out to me, but they've never read any of my stuff. They don't. They know of me, and they're like, they may see that I run this group with a lot of successful people, or whatever they perceive of, my success or whatever. And they will have not referenced a podcast or referenced anything that I've put out, or let alone been a client or bought anything, right? But the ones that have, and the ones that are sincere and genuine, and there are many of those are the ones that will get my attention. Those are the ones that I will respond back to. So do you prepare before you reach out to someone? I mean, at what point do you read an author's book? Do you see them? Like, because I'd love to kind of get into what is it that, because you are genuinely showing up because you're being that way. And a lot of people, if they became more of that, they would get more of what they want in life.
Yeah, so I say it is finding a real connection. And just as long as it's real, that is going to show.
Yeah.
So Robert Herjavec, who was on Dragon's Den, Shark Tank, that whole thing, I sent him a note one day saying what I loved about him being my favorite dragon, and what would it take to get him out to come speak at our conference. I heard back from him minutes later, which blew my mind, and he goes, funny that you reached out. He goes, we just had a speaker cancel for our conference. He said, I'll make you a deal. If you speak at mine, I'll speak at yours.
Oh, that's great.
And so it was relevant, it was timely, we had a connection. And it turned out to be incredibly fun. I'd never been in a Learjet before. And so after speaking at his conference, he goes, oh, where are you going now? And I said, oh, just off to the airport to catch my flight. He goes, why don't you come with me? So we drive to the airport, and I'm like, this isn't the same airport I was going to. And he goes, oh, no. I meant come with me as in my plane, and we'll fly back to Vancouver. And so moments that you never know what you'll get unless you just reach out and ask.
Totally.
And we had a connection in person and speaking at his conference that led to the rest of the connection, and he's put a nice note in my book and the whole bit. So I think you can reach out to anyone anytime, but there's got to be something that's real. You can't just say you're my favorite dragon if you're not really and there's nothing behind it. So even research, you know, I reached out to a CNN reporter in New York. I had read an article that I really enjoyed and connected with and decided to reach out to her. And I cited part of the article and said, here's what I really loved about this piece and why.
Yeah.
And she got in touch with me right away. And she's a busy CNN reporter.
Yeah.
And then it led to, a year later, an article that she did about us and put us on the homepage of CNN, which was strange.
That's cool though. That's
Happens,
fantastic.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people are too scared to reach out and understand that all these people, I mean, Richard Branson, you talked about, he's a human being.
Yeah.
Yes, he lives on Necker Island and, you know, it's got to be a pretty nice place, but he still has things that he's deeply connected to. Find a connection that's shared.
I met you at an event. I mean, you go to things. So, like, what is the value of like masterminds or groups? Because you're a person that participates in it, which I admire. Because a lot of people that aren't even anywhere near your level of business success, they think they got it and they quit going and they think they're too cool for school. And you've never been too cool for school.
Yeah, so I'm 49 years old. I have a $400+ million business. I have way more to learn than anyone could ever imagine. And so I will never stop learning. And so since I don't do well in school and since I don't do well reading books very well, it's going out and talking to people. And so these masterminds, I mean, you sit next to someone and then you realize that they've answered your problem and that the timeliness of sitting with someone and you share openly with what's going on in your world. And they're like, oh, I know someone I can connect you with, or I face that same issue. It's a shortcut. Yeah. Why not take a shortcut? Go to a mastermind and meet people and talk. Now, these things take work. You know, I think you can't just show up and, you know, the biggest value for me, for example, from Genius Network wasn't sitting there and hearing the keynote speakers.
Right.
It was getting off and sitting at different tables and going to talk with people and then, you know, again, working it. So Susie Pupuri.
Pupuri, yep. Susie Batiste.
How do you say it? Batiste, okay, yep. Susie Batiste. So I really enjoyed what she had to say and her energy in the world. And so right away when she was done, I went and walked over to the AV area because I wanted to say hello and give her a hug and chat. So, you know, again, these things take work.
Yeah.
But if there's a connection, reach out and connect with people.
Yeah, and anyway, you know, you show up, and that's one of the biggest things too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't show up, and then they wonder why. So I want to ask you, who is someone that you would love to connect with and meet that you haven't?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I find that the big name people that you think you'd want to connect with, I find every time I meet with someone like that, there's not the same level of connection.
Yeah.
You know, someone that's a big famous business person, entrepreneur, they might not be as open. I find it's the magical moments like being in Kenya and walking down a street and some kid loses one of his shoes in the mud and he and I just start connecting and chatting. Those are the people I want those moments. Yeah. Someone who, you know, you don't know the guy's name, the kid's name, you don't know anything about each other, and then you start talking and getting a conversation going. I'd rather learn from someone who I don't have a picture of in my brain already going, hey, you know, meeting that president, meeting that prime minister. Like, I don't know. So it's a good question. Who would I want to meet? I just want to meet the people that come into my life for different reasons randomly that I can communicate with.
Yeah.